Got to make sure that we're not getting that echo effect. All right, we are ready to go. Welcome. Are we? No, we're saying welcome. That's what we're doing. Welcome, welcome, Jokoistas. Welcome, YouTube world, to our Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa update. And I think, is this the first update we've had in a couple of months, maybe. I feel like we somehow took September off or something like that. But we have a very special guest tonight. We are welcoming Desiree Gaytan, a community organizer and a member of Unión del Barrio Los Angeles chapter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sly, we always, when we get started, acknowledge that we do this work on the unceded lands of the Tongva people, the First Nations of what's called the Los Angeles Basin now. You know, it's funny, I was just listening to a scholar briefly, right, before we got on, talking about the founding and the Republic of New Africa, right? The movement for the Republic of New Africa, from Ursinus College in Philadelphia. So I looked up Ursinus College and I saw that Ursinus College has a land acknowledgement statement, right? And lots of these institutions are putting these land acknowledgement statements, and wonder just how deep that land acknowledgement goes. We always want to start with the land acknowledgement because we always want to remind people that the United States is a settler colonial state, and it should never be overlooked that nations, on this continent are occupied. So again, we do this work from occupied Tongvar. Our guest tonight, Desiree P. Gaytan, is a grassroots organizer raised on the west side of Compton with roots in the West Adams area of Los Angeles. Desiree is part of the local leadership body of the Los Angeles chapter of the Unión del Barrio, a Mexican Latin American political organization that struggles towards liberation of the working class. As a member of Unión del Barrio, Desiree has organized in the education sector within and outside of the formal educational district systems towards improving the quality of education for the youth in her community. She was a founding member of Ethnic Studies Now, Compton, through which she dedicated 4 years towards organizing to gain ethnic studies courses as a high school graduation requirement within the Compton Unified School District. As a result of that community struggle, Desiree sat on the newly created District Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee. Desiree also has served as a co-coordinator for Unión del Barrio's alternative education project, Escuelita Aslan, which serves as a Saturday freedom school to youth in South Central LA. In addition to organizing within education, Desiree served on Unión del Barrio's Women's Commission. Desiree holds a BA in Chicano Studies with a minor in education from UCLA, and she and her fiance excitedly welcomed their first child in January of 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You are very, very welcome. Let's go ahead and move to our interview. But first I have to find the questions because I don't see I don't see them where I thought they were. So let me see. I think that was the other email I was in. That would be this one. Okay, just a second. See more. And there we go. So yes, we want to start off with Unión del Barrio. You know, would you please share its history and what is the work, what has been the work of Unión del Barrio?
Thank you. Well, first, I want to express our deep gratitude, first and foremost, for the work that you all are doing, the Joko Collective, with getting the word out and garnering support for the HOU 3, because that is an absolute necessity. And so we, as Unión del Barrio, the sister organization of the APSP, are very much happy to be here and to contribute to any of the work to garner our power to make sure that we resist and protect the struggle, the chairman, and the HOU 3.
Yeah.
And so as far as Unión del Barrio, well, our work is in simple terms, liberation work. The liberation work of our people here on this continent of Latin America. We see ourselves as an extension of the greater Latin American struggle that's anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist. Unión del Barrio itself was actually founded in Barrio Logan in San Diego, here in California. And that was in 1981. And so since then, we've, of course, thankfully grown and expanded our work. And I myself and now, find myself here in Los Angeles and found my way to the organization. And so that's in general terms what our work is. As far as projects, we have different sectors. We have different mass-based projects that get at the struggle of youth, the work of education, prisoners. For the youth, we have, as you mentioned earlier, Escuela Aslan, which is our Saturday Freedom School. Within education, we created an organization of teachers some years back. It's called the Association of Raza Educators, right? And that was as a response to protecting teachers who want to organize and lead by example, right? Not just teach liberation or teach critical thinking, teach students how to defend themselves in the real world. We also have a project that's called the Chicano Mexicano Prison Project, and that gets at the struggle for our people who are behind bars. And keeping that connection and keeping that organization going, right? Organization as far as liberation struggle. There's also the sector of international work. We are internationalists, and we think it's super important for us to make sure that we keep our struggles connected to what's going on abroad and outside of the U.S. colonial borders. As you mentioned earlier, the U.S. is a settler colonial state. And so in order to make sure that we have a collective struggle, it's important that we remain to be internationalists. Within the belly of the beast, there's also the fight of police brutality, the fight against border patrol and those types of agencies that quote unquote are about national security, right? Which they violate all the time. We are on stolen indigenous land. And so we have a program that's called the CDRs, Comités de Resistencia, the resistance committees, and neighborhood patrols. So in San Diego, our members patrol the streets very early in the morning, usually because that is when Border Patrol will go out and raid neighborhood homes, trying to kidnap our people who are undocumented. Here in South Central and LA, the patrols happen either early in the morning or in the evening to look out for police brutality. And so, and we also have had some work where we've gotten some of our members elected to local neighborhood councils, and that some of that organizing to optimize that type of power also.
Yeah. That's excellent. So those are the neighborhood councils locally here in LA County or within the city council districts of LA?
Within South Central.
Mhm.
Hmm.
That is fantastic. So something you mentioned, right, is really one of the questions we wanted to ask you, and that's about your own journey, right? You know, how did you come to Unión del Barrio?
Thank you. That's a really important question, and I was so glad to see it on the list, because I think many times, we see folks in the struggle and we think that's their thing. I could never do that, or
Right.
that's a little bold or whatnot. And we're just everyday people. I'm an everyday woman that is out here and has a deep love for my people.
Mhm.
I came into political life in high school. One of my teachers recommended that I attend a youth leadership conference, a Chicano youth leadership conference. And it was a 3-day conference where youth all over Los Angeles Unified were bused to some sort of campsite in Palisades. It was a beautiful site, and that conference was founded by Sal Castro. He
Mhm.
was one of the leading teachers of the walkouts on
Mhm.
the East Side in the 60s in East LA. And that 3-day weekend revolutionized my world, my love for myself, my culture, and the role that I could play in continuing that legacy
Yeah.
of youth that show up, students that show up and are at the forefront of social movements, liberation movements around the world. That weekend did that for me. And so once I continued on to college, I then attended UCLA for undergrad, and I majored in Chicana and Chicano studies with the minor in education. And that continued to build on my consciousness,
Mhm.
and politicizing myself as far as higher education. And so that was eventually the beginning of what I wanted to do and the part that I wanted to play with bettering my people's conditions. But I did not have the anti-colonial, the anti-imperialist scope just yet. I knew I
Mhm.
wanted to do something good. I knew that I could. I had the foundation of understanding of activism. But there's levels, right? And
Right.
so once after undergrad, I then went on to work. I had a job at actually a for-profit, one of those technical colleges. And the more that I learned about those types of organizations and whatnot, the more that it just didn't agree with my principles and its parasitic nature towards our
Mhm.
people. Um, our people are already in desperate need for basic necessities of housing, of medical care, of quality education, of safety, of healthy foods, of all kinds of sorts of basic needs for living a healthy and full life, a self-determined life. That it just didn't, I'm very glad that I had the foundation that I had with, the leadership conference, with my undergraduate experience, to be able to recognize that this organization, me being part of it, was a contradiction to what I made an oath to,
Mhm.
as far as who I
Mhm.
wanted to be for my people. And so once I started to have those self-reflections and began to be self-critical and then holding myself accountable, I began to do some research and look out there. And I found a youth program that I went to check out. It was in South Central, wasn't too far from Compton, where I lived. and it was actually Escuela Slan. It was the Unión del Barrio alternative education program. And so I attended, and I haven't left since. And so that is where I then began to develop my anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist understanding, and then be able to put that into practice.
That's a great story.
Thank you.
Yes.
Happy it turned out that way.
Yeah, right. And really the idea of that process too, right? That it isn't, one doesn't necessarily just wake up one day and,
right.
But that process of learning and, being in various aspects of the struggle, right? And coming up on their limitations and all that. So let's talk about principled solidarity.
Sure.
Describe Unión del Barrio as the sister organization of the African People's Socialist Party. So what are the things that unite these nations?
Well, let's see, a lot, and we can go on and on about what unifies us, but I think in first and foremost is a deep, deep, deep love for our people. And not just a love that is fragile and romanticized, rather a love that is disciplined, a love that is politicized and practical and collective, and a love that has the audacity, right? And so Unión del Barrio was founded, as I mentioned, in 1981 in Barrio Logan in San Diego. It was founded out of a need, right? It was we were founded by a group. Some of the founders were teachers, educators, Mexican everyday people who decided to get together and on somebody's porch, decided we need to do something about this. And that was in 81. Well, by, I want to say 1987, one of our founders, Ernesto Bustillos, who was our chairman at that time, had already been exposed to Chairman O'Malley. And so in 1987, our chairman, Ernesto Bustillos, invited Chairman O'Malley to San Diego to come and visit and to explore similarities as far as what the possibilities could be in uniting our struggles. And so since then, we've had an inseparable relationship, a political relationship that spanned over 37 years now, where we've continued to invest our time, our resources, and look to each other as far as creativity of how to build this people power. As far as geographically, some of our needs and abilities, are unique to that geographic location, to the people that inhabit those geographic locations. But we're students of each other, we're students of the struggle, and we have a deep love and respect and admiration for each other's organizations. I know that for us, I myself have been on a delegation, but our members have also visited and traveled with the APSP to St. Petersburg, Florida, to New Jersey, to Oakland, St. Louis, and I believe also Europe at one point. And so we've been all over the world, so to speak, with each other. And with that confidence comes that also responsibility, right? That confidence in each other, but that responsibility. And so we've also countless times have welcomed members of the APSP here to Southern California. And we know recently with these attack on the party, on the chairman, on the HOU 3, traveling under those circumstances over the past year have been pretty hard to manage, right? But we recently also did welcome the chairman here to South Central with his book tour. which was great. And it's always a great opportunity to be in the same room with one another. And so it's been a deep admiration for each other. We admire the resistance, the revolutionary fighting spirit left from the legacy of just freedom fighters who
Yes.
have left a path for us to follow, but also to not only follow, but to commit to build on, right? To build something new that's anti-colonial, because that struggle, as we see in Palestine, it's everywhere. And so there are connections to be made in order to build that people power that we deserve, that we desperately need, in order to lead for our collective liberation, right?
Right.
I know that there have been questions. At one of the delegations, there was a conference that we were at together, and someone asked, well, but what if, let's say, Unión del Barrio, wins the fight, or APSP wins the liberation fight? What are you guys going to do with each other? And so, we'll leave that up to us. I'm sure we'll figure something out.
Right.
That's not going to be a problem.
That's sort of a redundancy in that question.
There's no apology, no surrender. We stand very much firmly in support of one another organization.
That is, that's. So I've spent, I'm a born and raised Angelino, and I went to college in the Bay Area and lived up there for more than a decade, but I've spent most of my life in Los Angeles. And pretty much all the places I've lived, including in the Bay Area, Mexicans have been neighbors, right? And the Africans and Mexicans living side by side, primarily peacefully. But nonetheless, right, there are contradictions. So how does Unión del Barrio approach those contradictions? And, how do you see overcoming those challenges?
That's a really great question. And it's one that we always make sure that we hold ourselves accountable to that question, because it's no light task, right? But if we say that we do have a deep love for our people, then we must rise to meet that question and that need. Both of our peoples, whether it be Mexican indigenous, Latin American indigenous, African peoples, have faced colonization and enslavement, tremendous subjugation and abuses, both since 1492 to now, to present day, actively going. And so that also leads to a long history of us supporting and fighting alongside each other amongst a common oppressor. And so one of the things that we think is super important is to always make sure that we look to our history to figure out for ourselves who we are, where we come from, and what we're about. Because the oppressors and the powers that be will have you twisted in thinking that your enemy is your neighbor, as opposed to the systems that have been in place that have subjugated and oppressed our people for hundreds of years. And so by knowing ourselves and our history, by knowing our common oppressors, our common enemies, our common strengths and mutual gaining of power, that's the task of raising the consciousness of our people. There are plenty of examples of Black and Brown unification struggle throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. I know there's people, an example, Vincent Guerrero. He was an African Mexican who was one of the leaders of the Mexican independence, and eventually became the second president of Mexico. And so, you think about the days of enslavement, and slavery was abolished, and slavery was abolished in Mexico before it was in the US, and freed Africans were welcomed into Mexico, and there's that solidarity. And so there's plenty of examples that we can look to all the way through to the 1960s and 70s, and the Black Panthers working with the American Indian movement, working with the Brown Berets, and most recently here in LA, I know for ourselves, there was a situation where the LACD Council, there were some leaked tapes where the council members made some very disgusting, derogatory, racist comments about Africans and Indigenous people. And we definitely were in line calling for their resignation. And we have to hold our own people accountable, right? We have to raise the consciousness of our own people to make sure that we're not left fighting each other for the breadcrumbs that the oppressor leaves us, right? And so we know that historically, it's part of the process of being a colonized people, where we begin to take on their traits of violence and oppression. And so that's unlearning that we have to do. That's politicization that has to happen. That's consciousness raising that has to happen in order to unlearn those traits and that colonized thinking, that colonized mind. Whether it be the racism, the anti-Blackness, whether it be the sexism, whether it be even, homophobia, or, all of these isms, all of these negative colonized ways of thinking that we begin to internalize and begin to practice and reproduce, because we don't know who we are and where we come from. And we have the oppressor teaching us who we are and who they want us to be. So, that is definitely a part that Unión del Barrio takes very seriously, is contributing and combating that colonized thinking, that colonized way of thinking. Part of it is making sure that we, when things do happen in our communities or internationally, nationally, for us to make sure that we are connecting with our people and that we are sharing our analysis and our scope, our politics, our position, so that we not only we don't want to look down on our people and chastise our people and degrade them. We want to we want to be part of their process of coming home to themselves, their true selves, right? And so that we all move together, and we're not leading them. We're moving shoulder to shoulder in this fight to become free.
Yes.
Really appreciating everything that you just expressed. Something that I like to say is, the more we seek ourselves, the more we find each other on every level, whether we are throwing off, the imposed cultural and religious norms, whether we are pursuing revolutionary politics, whether we are just enjoying the everyday cultural exchange that is creating this lovely fusion culture that occurs in South Central LA and what have you. The more we are ourselves and seek ourselves, the more we find each other. Yes. And in our camp, one of the reasons why we because it took us a minute to say, we must insert this land acknowledgement. This is like a priority piece, is because a lot of times our multi-generational African immigrant people here, also known as African Americans, we have a sense of the gravity of our struggle with the European that does not remember and recall that we are not in our land. The struggle is not, you know what I'm saying? The fundamental contradiction is not black and white, that it is, this other piece, and how, our history of enslavement and our blood let on the land is, after, is an after. And that's something that we have to practice, we have to learn, we have to constantly insert, as we forget our own history of enslavement and our own history of Jim Crow is, marginalization and whatnot. There's a lot that creeps into our language that is, we come up with repeating anti-immigrant brown immigrant tropes. I've heard some of us say, oh, well, you're not going to do me like a Mexican, forgetting that the original phrase is, you're not going to do me like and I don't want to offend anybody's visceral sensibilities, so I'll say N-word. You know what I'm saying? And so it is always astonishing to me just how powerful and potent and meaningful that pursuit of truth that starts in that pursuit of love, simple love for people, simple humanity, love for your people, love for your community, and you drive it and you get more and you gather more and you gather more. The whole world, blooms in possibility. Just was inspired to say that from your
Thank you,
conversation. Thank you so much.
And if I can just, add on that of really briefly the importance of that and being, as I mentioned in my bio, with my fiance and myself, my fiance, he's also in organized struggle, a member of Unión del Barrio, and us making the decision to expand our family and welcoming our child, to the autonomy and self-determination, that is tied to this work that we're doing of self, but, not in an isolated individualistic way, rather in a way that is collective, right? A way where we take into account how we are impacting who we're around, what we're around, the land that we're on, because we can't continue to allow the colonial white supremacist ahistorical view of what's going on in the world, as we're seeing, with the attacks on the HOU 3, as we're seeing with, the attacks on indigenous people here, where Mexicans are made to feel as if we're foreigners or on our own historic homeland, as the Palestinian people are waging a freedom struggle on their own historic homeland and are being painted otherwise. And so definitely what we do and how we do it impacts the generations to come.
Well said. Well, we're coming to the close, and we'd like to close with any work Unión del Barrio is doing specifically to support the HOU 3 in this attack on Chairwoman Penny Hess and Jesse Neville specifically, who have now been indicted, right? So what are y'all doing?
Well, I do want to take this opportunity to once again reiterate our unconditional support for the African People's Socialist Party and to denounce the vicious attacks that the federal government and the FBI have waged against our brothers and sisters in struggle. As Unión del Barrio, we do understand the urgency, the gravity, because we know history, right? History is telling, and when you're doing something right in terms of your people and liberation, they are going to come after you. And so we understand the gravity of the situation. When several of their homes and offices of the party were raided on the 29th of July of last year. Within a couple of hours of those attacks, we did release a statement in full support of the leadership of the chairman. And shortly after that, we also organized an action, a press conference, a protest in front of the Los Angeles courthouse, federal courthouse, on the International Day of Action that they had. And so that was something that we did very early on in this process. And as our relationship goes deeper and longer than that, than putting out just statements of support or it doesn't stop at any symbolism, right? And so we know that it's key to have material action. They have our unconditional ideological unity. Early in October, we did host a series of events in San Diego and one here in South Central LA. where the demands were clear to drop the charges, all charges on the leadership of the party, and also to demand reparations, right, for the damages that the FBI raids have caused and continue to cause. And so furthermore, we're excited and we're welcoming all movement people at all levels to come out on November 4th, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, and to unite with the struggle in defense of the Uhuru 3, to unite with the anti-colonial struggle. And so it will be on Saturday, November 4th. It's going to be in the Leimert Park area on Crenshaw and MLK. We'll definitely make sure to send you the most updated flyer, and there's also a Facebook event page. And as Unión del Barrio, we also want to help the APSP establish a presence here in Los Angeles. Yeah. We know it is very much needed. It's needed so that we have a Black liberation organization that is waging the fight that's necessary. And so we have the November 4th action. It'll be a march and rally. We hope that we see all of you there. But beyond that, also building the presence of the party here in LA are two very concrete ways that we can help support these efforts.
All right. Speaking of which, Tasha, shall we go to the next slide?
And we shall.
Great. Yes, let's go ahead and announce that again. But while it's up there, I do want to say, thank you, Desiree. This was fantastic, right? Just as we knew it would be, and you really brought it. I mean, this was wonderful, and reminded me again of the importance of being able to tell our own story, tell our own histories, and how much those histories and those stories are suppressed. Mm-hmm. So here, right, the Black People's March in Los Angeles, and really let's start with the Black People's March in Washington, which I believe is now the 15th annual.
Yes,
that was started actually, and really in conjunction with the founding of the Black is Back Coalition, as a response to the neo-colonial leadership of a President Obama. And so I think since 2009, the first Saturday in November, the Black is Back Coalition has sponsored this march and rally in Washington. 15 consecutive years. And so again, it's continuing this year, November 4th in Washington, but for the first time, there will be this parallel action on the West Coast and other actions around the world, right? I know there was that at least London and maybe Pretoria, South Africa, or maybe a couple of places in South Africa, there will be parallel demonstrations. And definitely one of the demands is hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. So yes, please do join us. And now it's also come to my attention earlier today, watching some reporting from Gaza and on Gaza, that November 4th has been selected as an international day to show solidarity with the Palestinian people and the Palestinian struggle. So you can be sure that the Black People's March in Los Angeles will be showing solidarity, right? Expressing solidarity with the Palestinian struggle, as well as in Washington and everywhere else. So yeah, folks out there in the YouTube world, come on out. Tasha, I think we can go to the next slide now.
And if we do, we are closing out.
Well, before we do, you got any final comments for Desiree?
Just another hearty thank you It feels like power, making connection with conscious, self-identified people, from all these oppressed communities, and I am bolstered, I am emboldened, I am encouraged, and I am inspired. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you, Yusuf, Kasha, and of course the party for creating this opportunity and welcoming me into this discussion. Much appreciated. And hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, hands off the Uhuru 3, drop the charges, and we will see freedom in our lifetime.
We will see freedom in our lifetime. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Ashe.